Hey there, my name is Arduecha and today I will talk about the hidden excellence of Extinction. To start off with, I'm an amateur educated game designer, and this time I will be talking about the good parts of Extinction, rather than just the complaints. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that most of the world stuff opens up for world PvP. You may think that the DLC is very counter PvP, but it actually is quite the opposite. To point out, the systems they added this DLC opens up for way more organic PvP situations, such as the orbital drops, titan killing, or taming, as well as the small map. This is also enforced by the fact that the titan, when tamed, always is visible on the map for every player at any given time. This opens up for a lot of counter plays and organic PvP situation, and I think is a very nice touch. With this in mind, in the 1 week we played on Extinction, we were interrupted on one orbital drop with some sweet PvP, and we had an awesome fight over the Titan once they summoned it to tame it. Another thing I want to touch on quickly is the fact that Element is very accessible, which opens up for tech fights, which is very rare in Ark. On this note, there is finally blueprints for tech, which actually makes it viable in PvP. This has not been the case previously. One thing they may need to look into is to change the sound when you do orbital drops, to move it up to when you start it rather than when you finish it. And when I talk about moving it up, I'm talking about the global sound that everyone hears. This would spice it up a bit and make it more interesting and less mundane, which is good because then you get counterattacks and interesting PvP situations. Now, a big segment of the video will be something I haven't really seen them doing for a long time, and which actually does impact the game in a really good way. And that is all of the new quality of life changes they made, which is pretty rare when it comes to wildcard. First thing first, the thing I want to talk about is server improvements, and in this case it's mostly indirect, which is good because it's not as disruptive. Many of you may not know, but the biggest impact on server ping and server performance is the dinosaurs and their stats and food and everything. This is easily felt when there's thousands or hundreds of dinos idling without being used and just standing around without any meaningful interactions with players. And you may be asking, how did Extinction actually impact the server performance? Well, cryopods. And I'm not gonna lie, this is pretty clever because they don't need to be updated, they are a static thing for as long as they stay in the cryopod. Now, on top of this, the new kibble system that was introduced for the new dinos has a glimmer of hope in terms of change, which many of us asked for a long time. If they introduce this to be widespread and include every single dino in the game, this would have huge server impact. So please, wildcard, for the love of God, please introduce the kibble system to every dino now. This would be so nice for everyone. Moving away from server performance, we have way more uses for the cryopods in terms of quality of life, which includes breeding being more schedule friendly for once. For the first time you can control your schedule with breeding. You could use the cryopods to set the time and set the cycle you want. With cryopods you can ensure that you always hit the imprint, which is good, and it does have a backside to it, which balances it out so that it's not overpowered. And this is the fact that when you cryopod a baby, the imprint timer will reset back to the default timer, which normally is 8 hours, but it depends on server settings. Another use the cryopod has is to help with farming, and you may be asking, how does it even impact that? Well, it's pretty simple. You could take a farming dino to the farming area and then farm what you need. Cryopod the dino again. For instance, with Silicon Extinction, you could cryopod an Anki, farm the stuff and put it on the Archie, then cryopod and return to base. You might be thinking that I have been going on and on about cryopods, but I have one more thing which happens to be my favorite thing, and that is that you could use the cryopods to bring back new tames to your base. This is really nice, as with every other use. It still has a downside. It causes a breeding cooldown on females, The last ones is transport, which is nice, and it reduces the OPness of crawling caves, which is good on small traps at least, which is about time. Now you may be thinking that this is way too many uses for one item, but all of them have the same high risk backside. People can kill you and steal your chain, which balances it out pretty well. Do I feel like there's anything I would want to have changed with this? Honestly, no. I feel it's very balanced overall with the spam protection, with cryo sickness in terms of sleeping dinos and damage taken increased. It's very well balanced for PvP and very well balanced overall. Props to Wildcard. Now the next thing I want to touch on is something I think very few people have considered and thought about, and something that is very underestimated: dino leashes. You may be asking, wait, why? Well, this is the biggest change in the defense meta they have made. I know they have been talking about wanting to move away a bit from turrets, and this is probably the biggest one, so the potential of the system is immense in terms of defense. I know it's very nice for breeding and that they added the minimal setting for that, but this has way more impact than you might consider in terms of your potential defense systems and general base defense. With the possibility to control the area your dinos patrol, you can set up pretty cool and good perimeters for them to walk around to look for enemies. It has a few issues, however, and that is, first, there should be an option to select the aggression of dinos inside of the leash, with it going back to the selected one, typical aggressive when affected by the leash and passive when not. And secondly, it has a pretty severe bug where sometimes it stops working on the dinos inside of its area, which makes it unreliable. This is not good for base defense, because then you can't predict if someone can pull them out or not. This really needs to be fixed before it has any reliable and effective use in defense. Now I want to talk about the dinos, because I actually feel like they have done something really well here. The dinos is well designed, each one of them has unique uses, none of them fall off in usability quickly, from the gacha being a resource gatherer to the scout scouting the area in a fighting or defense. However, there's one gray sheep here, and that's the enforcer. Why, may I ask, is because it really isn't viable for the role it's supposed to fill, which is orbital supply drops. It falls very short here, as no matter how strong it is, and when I say strong, I tested it up to 35 points, and it still dies way too easily and seems to have some kind of aggro thing where they attack it almost immediately upon sight. So it would probably need some kind of protection or otherwise usability stuff that might be added to it, so that it doesn't have the same struggles, or at least can play around it and have some improvements to fighting the corrupted, which is kind of its core, as it does more damage and in general does loads of damage to them. It has an interesting use, that is for sure, but sadly it's not really usable in the context due to being way too squishy. Outside of that, we have the mech, which has loads of applications and interesting uses that can be taken advantage of. I know it's pretty underestimated at the moment after the nerfs and people don't really use it, but I think it could be good, especially with a decent blueprint. The Snow Owl has loads of interesting uses and is very popular, of course, because it's very strong, but it's not super good by itself, which makes it reliant on others to be fully taken advantage of, and that is kind of cool, no pun intended. And after the nerfs, it's good all around, however not godlike like it used to be, and that's actually great. The Managarmer I enjoy a lot. It's a great dino with good mobility and it has decent PvP usage with its special ability, the breath. It feels pretty good to use, and after a while you get used to it, but it's pretty rough to get used to the controls of it, but that's fine. It's okay to have a dino with a little challenge in the beginning. Okay, so the next part is kind of controversial, but the gas bag, which I find is a really fun dino to play around with. It's useful. It kind of has a few downsides, which is good. And I think this is to blame for their sudden change of heart when it comes to body bags. Personally, I'm not a fan of body bags because I feel like it diminishes stats on dinos such as the quet's weight and in general just stats on moving dinos as RGs and stuff like that. Now I'm gonna quickly touch on the scout because there's not that much to say about it, but what I would like it to have in addition to its useful utility is the fact that you could use it to check the stats of wild dinos. Just like the GCM rifle with the inspect tool, it would be cool and it would have a good trade-off with it being risky to do alone, and someone should probably keep you safe while doing it. Now the last thing I want to touch on before ending it here is that I actually kind of like the new changes to the resources, where it's actually kind of risky to go farming with the corrupted, and the big areas to get most metal and stuff is kind of scary. Honestly, personally, I feel like this makes the task way less mundane, which is good, because usually you are brain dead farming metal, which is boring. But now you kind of have to be careful, you have to look out for dangers, you have to put extra effort and thought into the process of farming metal, and honestly I feel it's more exciting. Well done. Now if you stuck all the way to this part, it means you watched the whole thing. Very cool. I would love to give you more if you want to. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, then I don't mind you disliking it. And if you want more similar content, then I would suggest to subscribe and click the bell maybe. I don't know, it's up to you.